The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest, but I kept my face neutral. Years of dealing with difficult clients in the IT consulting business had taught me that skill. Never let them see you sweat. Never let them know they've gotten under your skin. I'm pregnant, Ryan. It's Mason's baby. He satisfies me in ways you never could. Jenna stood in our kitchen doorway, designer handbag clutched in her manicured fingers, looking like she'd just announced the weather forecast. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite it being 8 in the evening. She'd clearly prepared for this moment. Mason, my business partner of 5 years, the guy I'd trusted with half my company, half my life savings, and apparently my wife's attention when I wasn't looking. Well, I said, setting down my coffee mug with deliberate care. That's quite the announcement. Should I break out the champagne or the tissues? Jenna's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. She'd expected tears, maybe anger, definitely begging. What she got was my trademark sarcasm, honed to a razor's edge by years of dealing with entitled clients who thought they knew better than the expert they'd hired. "You're not going to fight for me?" she asked, and I caught something in her voice. Disappointment? Had she wanted the drama? Fight for what, exactly? A woman who just told me she's carrying another man's child and enjoys comparing my bedroom performance unfavorably to my business partner. Forgive me if I'm not seeing the prize worth fighting for. I stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of me unfolding slowly. Jenna took a step back. Good. Let her remember that underneath the button-down shirts and client meetings, I'd grown up working construction with my dad before computers became my thing. "The wedding's in 3 months," she said, as if that settled everything. "I've already sent the invitations. My parents have paid for the venue." "Then I suggest you call them and explain the situation. I'm sure they'll understand their daughter's sudden change in reproductive circumstances." Jenna's composure cracked just a little. "Ryan, be reasonable. We can work this out. Mason and I, it just happened. But you and I have a life together. A future." "Had," I corrected. Past tense, as of about 2 minutes ago. I walked past her toward the bedroom, catching a whiff of expensive perfume and something else. Guilt, maybe, though Jenna had never worn that scent before. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "To pack your things. You'll want to stay somewhere else tonight. I hear Mason has a nice place downtown." The sound of her heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor told me she was following. "You can't just throw me out. This is my home too." I paused at the bedroom doorway and turned back to her. "Actually, it's not. Check the deed. My name, my credit, my down payment. You're a guest who's overstayed her welcome." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That wasn't entirely true. We'd lived together for 2 years, and legally, she might have some claim. But Jenna had always been too proud to read the fine print on anything, assuming her charm would smooth over any complications. It was a weakness I'd noted, but never planned to exploit until now. Her face went pale beneath the foundation. "You're being cruel. I'm being practical. You want Mason? You can have him, but you don't get to keep me as a backup plan while you explore your options." I started pulling her clothes from the closet, moving with efficient precision. Jenna had expensive taste, and everything was organized by color and season. It made packing easier. "The baby might not even be his," she said suddenly, desperately. "We could do a test after it's born." I stopped folding her silk blouses and looked at her. Really looked. The Jenna I'd fallen for 3 years ago had been confident, successful in her PR job, and sharp enough to keep up with my sarcasm. This woman standing in my bedroom looked like a stranger wearing Jenna's face. "Let me get this straight. You're pregnant. You told me it's Mason's. You said he satisfies you better than I do. And now you're suggesting it might be mine after all. What's your next trick, pulling a rabbit out of your purse?" I was angry when I said that about Mason. I didn't mean it. Which part? The pregnancy, the paternity, or the performance review? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I finished packing her immediate necessities into 2 suitcases. You can get the rest later when I'm not here. I'll leave the spare key with Paul. Paul Chen was my oldest friend, a former police detective who now ran security for my company. He'd never liked Jenna, though he'd been too polite to say so directly. His opinion was about to become very relevant. Ryan, please. Can't we talk about this like adults? I zipped up the second suitcase and set it by the door. We just did. You talked, I listened, and now I'm acting. Conversation over. Jenna's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Mason. Perfect timing. Is that your baby daddy checking in? I asked. Don't let me keep you from your important call. She clutched the phone tighter. It's not what you think. I think it's exactly what I think. Answer it. Tell him the good news about your conversation with the soon-to-be ex-fiancé. For a moment, we stared at each other across the bedroom that had been ours until 5 minutes ago. Jenna's phone kept buzzing. Finally, she grabbed the suitcases. This isn't over, Ryan. Yes, it is. She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily down the hallway and out the front door. I heard her car start and drive away. Only then did I sit down on the bed and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. 3 years of my life, gone. Wedding plans, shared dreams, the future I'd been building, all of it crumbling because my partner and my fiancé had decided to build their own future behind my back. My phone rang. Paul's name on the screen. Hey, I answered. Jenna just drove past my place like her hair was on fire. Everything okay? Paul lived 2 blocks away, close enough to notice neighborhood drama, close enough to be a good friend when I needed one. Define okay. She's pregnant with Mason's baby and just moved out. Silence on the other end. Then, well, that's a hell of a thing. That's one way to put it. You need me to come over? Not yet, but I'm going to need that security expertise of yours soon. What are you thinking? I looked around the bedroom, at the empty spaces where Jenna's things had been, at the engagement photo on the nightstand that would need to go in the trash, at the life I'd thought I was building that had turned out to be built on lies. I'm thinking Mason and Jenna just made the biggest mistake of their lives, and I'm thinking they don't know it yet. Paul chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. Now you're talking my language. What do you need? Information, phone records, if you can get them legally, social media activity, financial records for the business accounts Mason has access to, and I want to know everywhere they've been together and for how long. That's a tall order. Some of it I can do, some of it you'll have to handle through your lawyers. Then I better call my lawyers. After I hung up, I walked through the apartment, noting all the small changes I'd need to make. Jenna's coffee mug in the sink, her magazines on the coffee table, the bottle of expensive wine we'd been saving for our wedding night. I opened the wine and poured myself a glass. No point saving it now. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter, and I opened it to check my email. 3 messages from Mason about a client meeting tomorrow. One from Jenna's best friend Kira, asking about wedding dress shopping. 2 from vendors asking about final counts for the reception. I started typing responses. To Mason, we need to talk. My office, 9 a.m. To Kira, wedding's off. Ask Jenna for details. To the vendors, cancel everything. Send final invoices to Jenna Hayes directly. Then I opened a new document and started making lists. Assets to protect, passwords to change, client relationships to secure, legal steps to take. Jenna thought she could have her cake and eat it too. Keep the comfortable life with me while exploring her options with Mason. Maybe even string us both along until she decided which future she preferred. She'd made one critical error in that calculation. She'd assumed I'd roll over and take it, maybe even help raise another man's child while she figured out what she really wanted. Instead, she'd just handed me every tool I needed to destroy both their lives, legally and completely. I raised my wine glass in a toast to the empty apartment. Here's to new beginnings, Jenna. Hope you enjoy yours. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, before Mason could get there. Our company, TechFlow Solutions, occupied the top floor of a downtown building we'd leased 3 years ago when business really took off. 30 employees, major corporate clients, and enough revenue to make us both comfortable. Mason handled sales and client relations while I managed the technical side and operations. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to work. I unlocked Mason's office and spent 20 minutes going through his files, not breaking and entering. I owned 50% of everything in this building, including his desk. What I found made my jaw clench. Client contact lists with personal notes in Mason's handwriting. Considering switching to Henderson Tech. Unhappy with current service response times. Asking about competitor pricing. Henderson Tech was our biggest rival. The notes were dated over the past 6 months. I photographed everything with my phone, then put the files back exactly as I'd found them. By the time Mason arrived at 8:30, I was in my own office, coffee in hand, looking like I'd been there for hours. "Ryan?" Mason's voice carried that fake enthusiasm he used with difficult clients. "Got your message. What's so urgent?" I looked up from my computer screen. Mason Grant stood in my doorway, all 6 feet of perfectly groomed ambition. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a week, and his smile was the kind that sold million-dollar contracts to executives who should know better. "Close the door and sit down." His smile faltered slightly, but he complied. "Everything all right? You sound serious." "Jenna told me about the baby. Congratulations." The color drained from Mason's face so fast I thought he might faint. He gripped the arms of his chair like he was bracing for impact. "Ryan, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'm really curious about the timeline here. When did you two start your little arrangement?" Mason's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, "It wasn't supposed to happen. We were working late on the Morrison account, and Jenna brought dinner to the office. You were out of town for that conference in Chicago." The Morrison account. 6 months ago. I leaned back in my chair. "Interesting. That's about when you started making notes about clients being unhappy with our service." "What notes?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos. Mason's face went from pale to green. "You've been planning to jump ship and take our clients with you. How long before you plan to tell me?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Mason? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been screwing my fiancée and planning to screw me out of my business. That's quite a busy schedule you've been keeping." Mason straightened up, and I saw a flash of the arrogance that had made him successful in sales. "Look, the Jenna thing just happened. But the business, Ryan, you have to admit we've been growing apart professionally. You want to focus on the technical side, I want to expand into new markets. Maybe it's time we considered other options." "Other options like Henderson Tech?" "They made me an offer, a good one. I was going to talk to you about it." "When? After you'd already signed with them and taken half our client base?" Mason stood up, his composure returning. "This doesn't have to be ugly, Ryan. We can work out a fair separation. You keep the technical contracts, I take the sales relationships, everyone wins." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Everyone wins? You get my fiancé, my clients, and a clean exit from a company you helped build. What exactly do I win in this arrangement? You get to keep doing what you love without the hassle of client management. Isn't that what you always said you preferred?" The audacity was breathtaking. He'd been planning to destroy my business and steal my woman, and now he was trying to sell it to me as a favor. "Here's my counteroffer," I said. "You resign immediately. You sign a non-compete agreement that prevents you from working with any of our current clients for 2 years, and you forfeit your partnership stake in exchange for not being sued into bankruptcy." Mason's fake smile disappeared entirely. "You can't do that." "Check our partnership agreement, paragraph 12, subsection 4. Breach of fiduciary duty voids all partnership rights. Your little Henderson Tech negotiations qualify. I'd spent the early morning hours reviewing every legal document we'd signed when we started the company. My lawyer had insisted on ironclad protection clauses that I'd thought were overkill at the time. "This is about Jenna," Mason said. "You're letting personal feelings cloud your business judgment. This is about you being a snake in both my personal and professional life. The fact that you can't see the difference tells me everything I need to know about your character." Mason leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You want to know the truth, Ryan? Jenna came to me. She said you were boring, predictable, that you treated her like a business partner instead of a woman. She wanted excitement, passion, something you apparently couldn't provide." The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But I'd learned long ago not to let clients see when they'd landed a hit. "Fascinating. And I suppose you were just being a good friend by providing those services?" "I was being a man, something you might want to try sometime." I stood up slowly, letting my full height advantage become apparent. Mason was fit, but he'd never done real physical work. I had 6 inches and 40 pounds on him, plus years of construction work that had built muscle he'd never develop in his fancy gym. "Get out of my office. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you from the building." "You're making a mistake, Ryan. I have relationships with these clients that go back years. They'll follow me wherever I go." "Then I guess we'll find out how loyal they really are." Mason walked to the door, then turned back. "Jenna's better off without you. She deserves someone who can appreciate what she has to offer. She deserves someone who can afford her. Hope Henderson Tech pays well." After he left, I called Paul. "I need that security escort we discussed." "On my way." Then I called an emergency staff meeting. 30 employees gathered in the conference room looking nervous. Word traveled fast in a small company, and Mason's dramatic exit hadn't gone unnoticed. "I want to address the elephant in the room," I began. "Mason Grant is no longer with the company, effective immediately. I'll be handling his client relationships personally until we can hire additional sales staff." Hands went up immediately. Questions about job security, client retention, the future of the company. I answered them all honestly. Yes, we'd face some challenges. No, I wasn't planning layoffs. Yes, this was permanent. "What about the Morrison account?" asked Jennifer, our lead project manager. Mason was the primary contact. "I'll be calling them this afternoon. Anyone who wants to help with client transition planning, stay after the meeting." Half the staff stayed. The other half looked relieved that the drama was over and they could get back to work. By lunch, we had a plan for contacting every major client, explaining the situation professionally, and ensuring continuity of service. My phone buzzed constantly throughout the day. Text messages from Jenna, voicemails from Mason, calls from mutual friends who'd heard various versions of what happened. I ignored them all. At 5 o'clock, Paul knocked on my office door. "How'd the client calls go?" "Better than expected. 3 of them said they'd been getting calls from Henderson Tech and were wondering what was going on. Now they know." "And the others?" "Relieved to hear from me directly. Turns out Mason had been telling some of them that I was considering early retirement. Funny how he forgot to mention that to me." Paul settled into the chair Mason had vacated that morning. "So what's the next move?" I pulled out a legal pad covered with notes and diagrams. "Jenna thinks she can have her cake and eat it too. She's probably assuming I'll come crawling back once the shock wears off. Mason thinks he can take my clients and my woman and I'll just accept it like a gentleman. And instead, I'm going to teach them both what happens when you underestimate the boring, predictable guy." I showed Paul the timeline I'd constructed. 6 months of secret meetings, client poaching attempts, and personal betrayals. A pattern of deception that went far beyond a simple affair. "They've been planning this for months," I continued. "The pregnancy might have accelerated their timeline, but this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. They wanted to destroy my life and rebuild theirs from the pieces." Paul studied the timeline. What do you need from me? Phone records, if you can get them legally. Social media monitoring. And I want to know everything about their relationship. Where they've been, how long it's been going on, who else knows about it. That last part might be easier than you think. Jenna's friend Kira called me an hour ago. Apparently, she's been covering for Jenna for months and feels terrible about it. Kira wants to talk? She wants to confess. Says she can't live with the guilt anymore. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the first genuine smile I'd had in 24 hours. Set up a meeting. Tonight, if possible. Already did. 7 o'clock at Murphy's bar. Murphy's was a dive bar 3 blocks from the office, the kind of place where conversations stayed private and nobody asked too many questions. Perfect for what I had in mind. Paul, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Don't quote Casablanca at me. This isn't a movie. No, it's better. Movies have to be believable. Murphy's bar smelled like stale beer and broken dreams, which made it perfect for the conversation I was about to have. Kira sat in a corner booth, nursing a martini and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Her usually perfect makeup was smudged, and her designer purse sat unopened beside her like she'd forgotten it existed. I slid into the booth across from her. Thanks for coming. I don't know why I'm here, she said without looking up. This is going to ruin everything. Everything's already ruined, Kira. The question is whether you want to be part of the cleanup or part of the mess. She finally met my eyes. Kira had been Jenna's college roommate and closest friend for over a decade. If anyone knew the full scope of what had been happening, it would be her. She made me promise not to tell you, Kira said. She said it would destroy you, and she didn't want to hurt you unless she had to. Unless she had to? Interesting phrasing. What would have made it necessary? Kira took a large sip of her martini. If you found out on your own. If Mason left his wife for her. If the baby thing became obvious. Mason's married? This was news to me. Separated. Has been for 8 months. Jenna thought that meant he was available, but his wife doesn't know about the separation yet. He's been living in a corporate apartment downtown while they work out the details. The picture was getting clearer. Mason had been playing both sides, keeping his wife in the dark while pursuing Jenna, probably hoping to finalize his divorce quietly while building a new relationship. How long have you known? I asked. About Mason? 4 months? About the pregnancy? She paused. 3 weeks. And you didn't think I deserved to know that my fiancé was carrying another man's child? Kira's composure cracked. She said she wasn't sure it was his. She said there was a chance it could be yours, and she wanted to wait until she could do a paternity test. But she told me yesterday it was definitely Mason's. Because you came home early. She was supposed to meet Mason at his apartment to figure out what they were going to do. When you showed up, she panicked and just blurted everything out. I signaled the bartender for a beer. This conversation was going to require alcohol. What else, Kira? What other surprises am I going to discover? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. Jenna's been documenting everything. Photos, text messages, emails. She said she wanted proof in case things went badly. Proof of what? That you were emotionally distant. That you prioritized work over your relationship. That you weren't meeting her needs as a partner. The audacity was staggering. Jenna had been building a case against me while carrying on an affair with my business partner. She was planning to leave you anyway, Kira continued. The pregnancy just accelerated the timeline. She was going to wait until after the wedding, then file for divorce and claim you'd changed after marriage. And take half of everything I'd built. She said you owed her that much for the years she'd invested in the relationship. I laughed, a bitter sound that made Kira flinch. The years she invested, while she was planning my destruction and sleeping with my business partner. Ryan, I know how this sounds, but Jenna really did love you at the beginning. Mason just offered her something different. something exciting. Something that came with a corporate expense account and promises he had no intention of keeping. Kira nodded miserably. She found out yesterday that Mason's been telling his wife the separation was temporary, that he was just taking some time to think about their marriage. So Mason was playing both women. And he's been planning to leave your company for months. Jenna helped him identify which clients might be willing to switch. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Tell me about that. For the next hour, Kira laid out the entire conspiracy. Mason and Jenna had been meeting regularly, using business dinners and client events as cover. They'd identified the most profitable accounts and developed strategies for transitioning them to Henderson Tech. Jenna had used her PR skills to craft narratives that would make the switches seem natural. The Morrison account was the test case, Kira explained. Mason told them you were considering early retirement and that he was the natural successor to handle their business. When they seemed receptive, he knew the strategy would work with other clients. And Jenna helped develop this strategy. She said it was just theoretical at first, like a case study. But then Mason started implementing it, and she realized how serious he was. Did that bother her? Not as much as it should have. She said you'd be fine, that you were smart enough to rebuild. She was more worried about whether Mason would actually leave his wife. By the time we finished talking, I had enough information to destroy both their reputations and probably their careers. Kira had saved text messages, forwarded emails, and even recorded a few phone conversations where Jenna had detailed her plans. "Why are you giving me all this?" I asked. "Because I can't live with myself knowing what they did to you, and because Jenna threw me under the bus yesterday when you confronted her. She told Mason I was the one who convinced her to confess." "And Mason believed that?" "Mason's not as smart as he thinks he is. He called me last night screaming about how I'd ruined everything. Said if I'd kept my mouth shut, they could have managed the situation better." I finished my beer and looked at Kira across the table. She'd been complicit in the deception, but she was also the key to unraveling it completely. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "What?" "Keep pretending to be Jenna's friend. Let her think you're still on her side. I want to know what she and Mason are planning next." "I don't know if I can do that." "You've been doing it for months. A few more days won't hurt." Kira agreed reluctantly. We exchanged contact information, and I walked her to her car. As she drove away, I called Paul. "How'd it go?" he answered. "Better than expected. Much better. Can you meet me at the office? I have some documents to scan and some phone calls to make." "It's almost 10 o'clock. This can't wait until morning. Mason and Jenna are probably planning their next move right now. I want to be ready for them." Back at the office, I spent 2 hours organizing everything Kira had given me. Text messages showing Mason and Jenna coordinating their stories, emails discussing client vulnerabilities, photos of them together at restaurants and hotels over the past 6 months. The most damaging evidence was a recorded phone call from 3 weeks ago. Jenna explaining to Kira how she planned to manage Ryan's expectations during the divorce proceedings. "He's so focused on being fair and reasonable," Jenna's voice said through my computer speakers. "He'll probably agree to mediation instead of fighting in court. I can get the house, half his business assets, and probably alimony if I play it right." Paul whistled low. "That's cold. That's evidence. Premeditated fraud in anticipation of a marriage that was never going to happen." I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Then I started making phone calls. First, my lawyer. Emergency consultation scheduled for 8 a.m. Second, my accountant. Full audit of all business and personal accounts, with special attention to any transactions Mason might have influenced. Third, Henderson Tech's CEO. A courtesy call to let him know that his new sales director had been sharing confidential client information in violation of his non-compete agreement. That last call was particularly satisfying. Henderson Tech's CEO, David Park, had always struck me as an honorable businessman. When I explained what Mason had been doing, his response was immediate and decisive. We'll be terminating our relationship with Mr. Grant effective immediately, Park said. And Ryan? I'm sorry this happened. Your reputation in this industry is solid. Mason's just destroyed his. By midnight, I had a complete battle plan. Legal action to protect my business assets, financial moves to secure my personal accounts, and a social media strategy that would ensure everyone in our professional and personal circles knew exactly what Mason and Jenna had done. Paul looked over my notes. This is comprehensive and brutal. They wanted to play games with my life. Now they get to learn the rules. What's the first move? I showed him a group text I'd prepared, ready to send to 30 mutual friends, business contacts, and family members. Wedding announcement, I said, explaining why the ceremony has been canceled and thanking everyone for their understanding during this difficult time. The message was perfectly crafted, professional, dignified, and devastating. It explained that Jenna was pregnant with another man's child and that Mason had been planning to leave our company while poaching clients. It thanked people for their support and asked for privacy during the transition. Most importantly, it positioned me as the wronged party, taking the high road while making it clear that Jenna and Mason were the villains of the story. When do you send it? Paul asked. Tomorrow morning, right after my lawyer confirms I'm not opening myself up to defamation claims. And then? Then we see how Mason and Jenna handle being on the receiving end of a coordinated attack. I locked the office and walked to my car, feeling more energized than I had in months. For the first time since Jenna's confession, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. They'd made the mistake of thinking I was weak, predictable, easy to manipulate. Tomorrow, they'd start learning how wrong they were. The group text went out at 7 a.m. sharp, just as people were checking their phones over morning coffee. By 8:30, my phone was buzzing constantly with responses. Shock, outrage, support, and requests for more details flooded my inbox. The best response came from Jenna's mother. I'm so sorry, Ryan. We had no idea. Jenna's father wants to speak with Mason personally. I was still reading messages when Mason burst into my office building lobby. Through the security cameras, I watched him argue with the guard, demanding access to the elevators. Paul had already briefed security about the situation. Mr. Cole doesn't want to see you, the guard said calmly. You're no longer employed here. This is harassment, Mason shouted. He's destroying my reputation with lies. Then I suggest you contact your lawyer. Mason stormed out, but I knew he'd be back. Cornered animals always fought hardest when they had nothing left to lose. My lawyer called at 9. The text message is fine legally. Everything you stated is factually accurate and can be proven. But Ryan, be careful about escalation. Don't give them ammunition to use against you. What kind of ammunition? Harassment, stalking, anything that makes you look like the aggressor. Keep everything legal and documentable. Understood. At 10, Kira called. Jenna's having a meltdown. She's been calling everyone who got your message, trying to explain her side of the story. How's that going for her? Not well. Your message was too detailed and too accurate. She can't deny the facts, so she's trying to claim you're being vindictive. What about Mason? He's furious. He called her screaming about how she ruined everything by confessing. They had a huge fight, and now he's not answering her calls. Perfect. When conspirators turned on each other, they usually destroyed themselves more effectively than any outside force could. Keep me posted, I told Kira. The morning brought more good news. 3 major clients called to confirm their loyalty to my company. 2 potential new clients reached out, having heard about the situation through industry contacts and wanting to work with someone who handled adversity professionally. But the real satisfaction came at lunch. I was eating a sandwich at my desk when the building's fire alarm went off. Everyone evacuated to the parking lot across the street, including me. That's when I saw Mason's car parked illegally in a loading zone, engine running. He was sitting inside, talking animatedly on his phone, completely oblivious to the evacuation happening around him. The fire department arrived, followed by police to direct traffic. One of the officers noticed Mason's car blocking the fire lane and approached his window. I couldn't hear the conversation from across the street, but Mason's gestures suggested he wasn't being cooperative. The officer wrote him a ticket. Then another officer arrived and wrote him a second ticket for parking in a no-parking zone. Mason finally drove away, but not before half the office building had seen him arguing with police. "False alarm," Paul said, appearing beside me. "Faulty sensor in the third-floor bathroom. Convenient timing." Very convenient, almost like someone who knew the building's systems might have triggered it accidentally while testing the fire safety equipment. I looked at Paul with new appreciation. That would be highly unethical. Yes, it would. Good thing it was just a malfunction. The afternoon brought even better entertainment. Jenna showed up at my apartment building at 3 o'clock, using her key to get into the lobby. I watched through the security camera as she knocked on my door, then tried her key in the lock. The key didn't work. I'd changed the locks that morning. She knocked louder, then started calling my name. Other residents began peeking out of their doors. Mrs. Patterson from 4B, a retired teacher with strong opinions about proper behavior, emerged fully and approached Jenna. I couldn't hear the conversation through the camera, but I could see Mrs. Patterson gesturing sternly while Jenna tried to explain herself. Finally, Mrs. Patterson retreated to her apartment and returned with her phone. Building security arrived 10 minutes later and escorted Jenna from the premises. The security guard called me afterward to confirm she should be added to the no-access list. "Absolutely," I said. "She no longer lives here and has no legitimate reason to be in the building." By 4 o'clock, Mason had made his next move. He called an emergency meeting with our 3 biggest clients, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and couldn't be trusted to handle their accounts properly. Unfortunately for Mason, all 3 clients called me immediately to verify his claims. I spent an hour on conference calls, calmly explaining the situation and providing documentation of Mason's attempts to poach their business. "We never trusted him completely," admitted Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries. "He always seemed too smooth, if you know what I mean. We're glad to be working directly with you now." The other 2 clients expressed similar sentiments. Mason's emergency meeting had backfired spectacularly, but Mason wasn't done. At 6 p.m., he showed up at Murphy's bar, where I was having dinner with Paul. He'd been drinking, and his usually perfect appearance was disheveled. "You think you're so smart," he said, stumbling slightly as he approached our table. "But you have no idea what you're dealing with." "I'm dealing with a drunk man making threats in a public place," I replied calmly. "Paul, are you getting this on video?" Paul held up his phone. "Every word." Mason noticed the camera and tried to straighten up. "This isn't over, Ryan. You can't destroy my life and expect no consequences." "I'm not destroying your life, Mason. You destroyed it yourself when you decided to betray your business partner and sleep with his fiancée. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." "Jenna never loved you. She told me you were boring in bed and boring in life. She was just using you for financial security while she figured out what she really wanted." The words stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what she really wanted was a married man who lies to his wife, steals from his business partner, and makes promises he can't keep? Interesting choice." Mason's face flushed red. "At least I know how to satisfy a woman. Do you? Because from what I hear, you've been telling your wife that your separation is temporary while promising Jenna you're getting divorced. That doesn't sound like satisfying anyone. How do you—" Mason stopped himself, realizing he'd just confirmed information he didn't know I had. "How do I know about your wife? The same way I know about your Henderson Tech deal falling through. The same way I know about your client poaching strategy. You're not as clever as you think you are, Mason." Mason looked around the bar, suddenly aware that other patrons were watching the confrontation. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're going to regret this. Both of you." He turned and walked toward the exit, but his coordination was off. He bumped into a table, knocking over someone's beer. The patron, a large man in work clothes, stood up angrily. "Watch where you're going, buddy! Get out of my way!" Mason snapped. The worker grabbed Mason's shirt. "What did you say?" Paul was already moving, his police training kicking in. "Gentlemen, let's keep this civil." But Mason, drunk and humiliated, made the worst possible choice. He took a swing at the worker. He missed completely, lost his balance, and fell backward into another table. Beer and nachos went flying. The entire bar erupted in chaos. Paul and I watched from a safe distance as Mason was escorted out by the bartender and two regulars. Someone had called the police, and Mason spent the night in a holding cell for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. "That went better than expected," Paul said. "I almost feel sorry for him. Almost." My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "Jenna's been trying to reach Mason all evening. She doesn't know about his arrest yet. She's planning to go to his apartment tomorrow morning to fix things between them." I showed the message to Paul. "What are the odds Mason will be in a mood to reconcile after spending the night in jail?" "About the same as the odds that Jenna will handle rejection well." "This is going to be interesting." We finished our drinks and left Murphy's, stepping over the broken glass that marked the spot where Mason's dignity had shattered, along with his coordination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight felt like a victory. The boring, predictable guy was turning out to be full of surprises. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Kira called at 7 a.m., her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "Ryan, you need to know something. Jenna went to Mason's apartment last night after he got out of jail." "And?" "She's not pregnant." I sat up in bed, fully awake instantly. "What do you mean she's not pregnant?" "She lied. The whole thing was fake. She bought a pregnancy test online that always shows positive, took photos of it, and has been pretending for 3 weeks. The room seemed to spin around me. Why would she fake a pregnancy? To force Mason to commit. She thought if he believed she was carrying his child, he'd leave his wife and marry her instead. But when you came home early that night, she panicked and used the fake pregnancy to justify leaving you." I got out of bed and started pacing. "So there's no baby. No baby. And Mason figured it out last night when she tried to comfort him after his arrest. She slipped up and mentioned symptoms that didn't match her timeline. When he pressed her for details, she confessed." "How did he take it?" "He threw her out of his apartment, literally. She called me at 3 a.m., crying hysterically. She's been lying to everyone, including herself." The implications hit me like a freight train. Jenna had destroyed our relationship, my business partnership, and both our reputations over a lie. A lie designed to manipulate Mason into leaving his wife. "Where is she now?" "At her parents' house. Her mother called this morning asking what really happened. Jenna finally told them the truth about the fake pregnancy, but she's still claiming you were emotionally abusive, and that's why she sought comfort with Mason." Emotional abuse. That's rich. It gets worse. She's planning to go to your mutual friends and claim you manipulated the situation to make her and Mason look bad. She wants to paint herself as the victim of your vindictive campaign. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. She faked a pregnancy, helped my business partner steal clients, planned to defraud me in a divorce, and now she wants to claim I'm the villain. She's desperate, Ryan. Mason won't take her calls, her parents are furious, and everyone who got your group text is treating her like a pariah. She's got nothing left to lose. That makes her dangerous. Very dangerous. She asked me to help her prove that you've been harassing her and Mason. She wants to file restraining orders against you. Based on what evidence? That's the thing. She wants me to lie for her. Say that you've been calling her constantly, following her, threatening her. She thinks if she can make you look unstable, people will believe her version of events. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. And what did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. But Ryan, I can't do that to you. You've been nothing but honest through this whole mess. She's the one who's been lying and manipulating everyone. I need to see her, face to face. That's exactly what she's hoping for. She wants you to confront her so she can claim harassment. Then I'll have to be smarter than that. I spent the morning consulting with my lawyer about the new developments. The fake pregnancy changed everything legally. It proved premeditation and fraud, which strengthened my position if Jenna tried to pursue any legal action against me. The restraining order threat is mostly bluster, my lawyer explained. She'd have to provide evidence of harassment or threats, and from what you've told me, you've been careful to keep everything legal and documentable. What if she lies under oath? Then she commits perjury, which is a felony. But Ryan, don't give her any ammunition. No direct contact, no phone calls, no showing up at places where she might be. What about mutual friends? Social gatherings? Public places with witnesses are fine. Just don't engage with her directly if you can avoid it. That afternoon, I got a call from Henderson Tech's CEO, David Park. Ryan, I wanted to update you on the Mason Grant situation. I'm listening. We terminated his contract yesterday, as I mentioned. But this morning, he called demanding we honor our original agreement. He claims you've been spreading false information about him to damage his reputation. What did you tell him? I told him that everything you shared with me was verified through our own investigation. Mason had been sharing confidential client information in violation of his non-compete agreement. That's grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. Legal action? We're considering it. He cost us a potential partnership with Morrison Industries because of his unethical behavior. Our legal team thinks we have a strong case for damages. This was better than I'd hoped. Mason wasn't just losing his new job, he was facing potential lawsuits from multiple directions. There's something else, Park continued. Mason mentioned that his former fiancée has information that could damage your credibility. He suggested we contact her for details about your character. Former fiancée? That's what he called her, Jenna Hayes. He seemed to think she'd corroborate his claims about your behavior. I almost laughed out loud. Mason was so desperate, he was still trying to use Jenna as a character witness, apparently unaware that she'd already confessed to lying about the pregnancy. Mr. Park, I'd be happy to provide you with documentation of Ms. Hayes's credibility, including recorded admissions of fraud and conspiracy. That won't be necessary. Mason's behavior speaks for itself, but I wanted you to know he's still trying to drag others down with him. After the call, I realized Mason and Jenna were both spiraling out of control. They'd lost their alliance with each other, but they were still trying to use the same tactics that had backfired so spectacularly. Paul called at 4 o'clock. I've got news about your ex-partner. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. Mason's wife filed for divorce this morning. Apparently, she found out about his affair and his business problems from a mutual friend who saw your group text. How is that good or bad news? Good news. Mason's losing his marriage along with everything else. Bad news. He's now completely unhinged and blaming you for destroying his entire life. What's he planning to do about it? That's what worries me. Kira says Jenna's been trying to contact him all day, wanting to team up against you. If they decide to coordinate their attacks, they could do some real damage. Or they could destroy each other trying. Desperate people make stupid mistakes. That evening, I decided to test Paul's theory. I had dinner at Romano's, an upscale restaurant where Jenna and I used to go for special occasions. It was exactly the kind of place she might choose for a dramatic confrontation. Sure enough, she was there. Sitting alone at a corner table, checking her phone constantly, looking like she was waiting for someone who wasn't going to show up. I asked the hostess for a table across the room, positioned so I could see Jenna, but far enough away to avoid direct interaction. Then I settled in to watch the show. Jenna saw me within 5 minutes. Her face went through a range of emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally, determination. She stood up and walked toward my table. Ryan, what a coincidence. Hello, Jenna. Dining alone? I was supposed to meet someone, but they canceled. She glanced at the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit? Actually, I do. I'm expecting company. We need to talk. No, we don't. We said everything we needed to say 3 days ago. Jenna sat down anyway, ignoring my objection. I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. You're destroying innocent people's lives. Innocent people. That's an interesting way to describe yourself and Mason. Mason made mistakes, but he doesn't deserve what you're doing to him, and neither do I. I signaled the waiter for another glass of wine, taking my time before responding. What exactly am I doing to you, Jenna? You know what? The text messages, the social media posts, turning our friends against us. It's harassment. I sent one group text explaining why our wedding was canceled. Everything in that message was factually accurate. If that turned people against you, maybe you should examine your own behavior. Jenna's composure cracked slightly. You made me sound like a monster. I made you sound like a woman who was pregnant with another man's child while engaged to someone else, which, at the time, was exactly what you claimed to be. Things are more complicated than that. Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, they seem pretty straightforward. You and Mason conspired to destroy my business and my personal life. When that failed, you both started looking for ways to blame me for the consequences of your own actions. That's not true. Isn't it? Then explain the fake pregnancy, Jenna. Her face went white. How did you? The same way I found out about everything else. You're not as good at deception as you think you are. Jenna looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware that other diners were watching our conversation. You're recording this, aren't you? I don't need to record it. You're doing a fine job of incriminating yourself without any help from me. She stood up abruptly. This isn't over. Yes, it is. It's been over since the moment you decided to lie about carrying another man's child. Everything that's happened since then has just been the natural consequences of that choice. Jenna walked back to her table, grabbed her purse, and left the restaurant without another word. I finished my wine and ordered dessert, feeling more relaxed than I had in days. The confrontation had confirmed what I'd suspected. Jenna was desperate, isolated, and running out of options. She'd tried manipulation, lies, and threats, but none of her usual tactics were working. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of this drama, and I was ready for it. The end came faster than I expected, triggered by Mason's final desperate gambit. At 8 a.m., my building's security called to report that someone had tried to break into my office overnight. The cameras had caught everything. Male suspect, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap, the security chief explained. He used what looked like lockpicks on your office door, but the alarm system scared him off before he could get inside. Did you get a clear shot of his face? Not initially, but when he was leaving, he looked directly at the lobby camera. We've got a perfect image. The image was Mason, looking haggard and desperate, his usually perfect hair disheveled under a cheap baseball cap. He'd been caught red-handed attempting to break into my office, probably looking for evidence he could use against me. We've already filed a police report, the security chief continued. They'll want to speak with you about pressing charges. Absolutely. I'll be there in an hour. I called Paul on the way to the office. Mason just handed us the final piece of evidence we needed. What did he do now? Attempted breaking and entering, caught on camera. The police are already involved. Paul whistled. That's a felony charge. His career in this industry is over. It gets better. I'm betting he didn't tell Jenna about his midnight adventure. When she finds out he's facing criminal charges, she'll distance herself as fast as possible. At the police station, I gave my statement to Detective Sarah Williams, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who seemed unimpressed by Mason's amateur criminal skills. This is pretty straightforward, she said, reviewing the security footage. Clear images, obvious intent, failed attempt, but still criminal behavior. We'll have a warrant issued within the hour. What kind of charges is he looking at? Attempted burglary, criminal trespass, possibly conspiracy if we can prove he was working with someone else. First offense, he might get probation and community service, but his professional reputation will be destroyed. Detective, there's something else you should know about Mr. Grant's recent behavior. I provided her with documentation of Mason's harassment at Murphy's bar, his client poaching attempts, and his conspiracy with Jenna to defraud me. Detective Williams took notes with growing interest. This paints a picture of escalating behavior, she said. We'll include it in our report. By noon, Mason had been arrested at his apartment. The news spread quickly through our professional network. Henderson Tech issued a statement distancing themselves from their former sales director. 3 of Mason's former clients called to express their shock and confirm their loyalty to my company. But the real fireworks started when Jenna found out. Kira called me at 2 o'clock, barely able to contain her excitement. Jenna just found out about Mason's arrest from her lawyer. She's having a complete meltdown. What kind of meltdown? The kind where she throws things and screams about how everyone has betrayed her. She called Mason's lawyer demanding to know why she wasn't warned about his criminal behavior. Then she called her parents and told them she was the victim of a massive conspiracy. How did her parents react? Her father hung up on her. Her mother told her to get professional help and stop calling until she was ready to take responsibility for her actions. Even Jenna's family had reached their limit with her lies and manipulation. What's her next move? That's the beautiful part. She doesn't have one. Mason's facing criminal charges and won't return her calls. Her parents won't support her. Her friends have all seen through her lies. She's completely isolated. And desperate people do desperate things. Exactly. Which is why I'm calling. She asked me to help her break into your apartment to look for evidence that you've been stalking her. I sat up straighter. She wants you to help her commit a crime. She doesn't see it as a crime. She sees it as gathering evidence to support her harassment claims. She's completely delusional at this point. What did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. But Ryan, I think she's planning to do it with or without my help. She's that desperate. I called Detective Williams immediately. I have reason to believe Jenna Hayes might attempt to break into my apartment tonight. Based on what information? I explained Kira's warning, providing context about Jenna's escalating behavior and her connection to Mason's criminal activity. We can't arrest someone for crimes they haven't committed yet, Detective Williams said. But we can increase patrols in your area and make sure officers respond quickly if your building's alarm system is triggered. That's all I'm asking for. That evening, I prepared for Jenna's visit. I installed additional security cameras in my hallway, backed up all my important files to cloud storage, and made sure my phone was fully charged and ready to record any confrontation. At 10 o'clock, I was reading in my living room when the building's security system chimed. Someone had entered the lobby using an unauthorized key card. The security cameras showed Jenna, dressed in black and carrying a large purse, heading for the elevator. I called 911 first, then building security. Jenna Hayes is in the building without authorization. She's heading for my floor. Police are on the way, the dispatcher confirmed. Stay on the line and don't engage with the subject directly. I heard Jenna's footsteps in the hallway, then the sound of metal on metal as she tried to pick my lock. She was better at it than Mason had been, but not good enough. After 5 minutes of fumbling, she started knocking on the door. Ryan, I know you're in there. We need to talk. I didn't respond, but I started recording with my phone. Ryan, open this door. I have evidence that you've been harassing me, and I'm not leaving until we settle this. The knocking became pounding. Other residents began opening their doors to see what was causing the disturbance. Mrs. Patterson from 4B emerged with her phone, clearly ready to call the police herself. Ma'am, you need to keep it down, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. This is a residential building, not a nightclub. Mind your own business, Jenna snapped. This is between me and Ryan. When you're disturbing the entire floor, it becomes everyone's business. More residents emerged from their apartments. Jenna found herself facing a small crowd of annoyed neighbors, all of whom recognized her as the woman who'd been escorted out by security 2 days earlier. Ryan Cole is a manipulative stalker, Jenna announced to the assembled crowd. "He's been harassing me and my boyfriend, and I have proof." "Then why don't you call the police instead of breaking into his apartment?" asked Mr. Johnson from 4A. "I'm not breaking in, I'm gathering evidence." "With lockpicks?" Mrs. Patterson held up her phone, showing that she'd been recording Jenna's attempted break-in. "I've got it all on video, dear." That's when the police arrived. 2 officers stepped off the elevator and immediately assessed the situation. Jenna standing in front of my door with lockpicks scattered at her feet, a crowd of witnesses, and clear evidence of attempted breaking and entering. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the door and put your hands where I can see them." "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Jenna said, switching to her most charming voice. "I'm being stalked by the man who lives in this apartment. I was trying to get evidence to support my harassment complaint." "By breaking into his home?" "I wasn't breaking in. I was investigating." One of the officers examined the lockpicks, while the other took statements from the witnesses. Mrs. Patterson eagerly shared her video footage, which clearly showed Jenna attempting to pick the lock. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and disturbing the peace." As they handcuffed Jenna, she looked directly at my door and screamed, "This isn't over, Ryan. I'll make you pay for destroying my life. Ma'am, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." But Jenna was beyond caring about legal consequences. As the officers escorted her to the elevator, she continued shouting threats and accusations that only made her situation worse. After they left, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door. "Ryan, are you all right in there?" I opened the door for the first time in an hour. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for recording everything." "That woman is clearly unstable. I hope they get her the help she needs." The next morning, Detective Williams called with an update. "Jenna Hayes has been charged with attempted burglary, criminal trespass, and making terroristic threats. Her bail hearing is this afternoon." "Will she get out?" "Probably, but with strict conditions. No contact with you, no coming within 500 feet of your home or office, and mandatory psychological evaluation." "What about Mason?" "He's cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a plea deal. Apparently, he's very eager to distance himself from Ms. Hayes and her escalating behavior." That afternoon, I received a call from Jenna's lawyer, a tired-sounding man named Robert Chen, who seemed to be earning every penny of his fee. "Mr. Cole, my client would like to discuss a resolution to this situation." "What kind of resolution?" "She's willing to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and accept a restraining order in exchange for you not pursuing civil damages for her harassment campaign." "And what would I get out of this arrangement?" "Peace of mind. No more midnight break-in attempts, no more public confrontations, no more social media drama. She disappears from your life completely." I considered the offer. Jenna was facing criminal charges and had destroyed her own credibility so thoroughly that she posed no real threat to my reputation. But having a legal guarantee of no future contact was appealing. "I'll agree on one condition. The restraining order is permanent, not temporary, and if she violates it even once, all bets are off." "Agreed. I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning." That evening, Paul and I celebrated at Murphy's Bar, the same place where Mason had made his drunken threats just a week earlier. The broken glass had been cleaned up, but the memory of Mason's humiliation lingered. "So it's really over?" Paul asked, raising his beer. "It's over. Mason's facing criminal charges and will probably never work in this industry again. Jenna's facing her own charges and has agreed to disappear from my life permanently, and my business is stronger than ever." "What about the wedding venue? The deposits?" "All in Jenna's name, her problem now." We clinked glasses and drank to new beginnings. Around us, Murphy's Bar hummed with the usual crowd of working people unwinding after long days, completely unaware that they were witnessing the end of a drama that had consumed my life for the past week. My phone buzzed with a text from one of my clients. "Heard about your recent troubles. Glad to see you handled everything professionally. Looking forward to our next project. Professional. That's how I'd be remembered from this mess. The guy who kept his cool while his world fell apart, who fought back legally and ethically, who never stooped to his enemy's level. Jenna and Mason had tried to destroy me through lies, betrayal, and criminal behavior. Instead, they'd destroyed themselves while making me stronger and more successful than before. Sometimes the best revenge really was living well. But in this case, it hadn't hurt to help karma along with a little strategic planning and a lot of careful documentation. Here's to boring, predictable guys, I said, raising my glass one more time. Here's to guys who aren't as boring as they look, Paul replied. Outside Murphy's windows, the city continued its nightly rhythm, indifferent to the small human dramas that played out in its bars and offices and apartment buildings. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new stories. But tonight, justice felt like a perfectly aged whiskey, smooth going down and warming from the inside out. The final audit was complete, and the books were balanced.